Now, speaking of this great country, let's talk about the problems we've been having with China, and yet another slap at us today with yet another beef producer shut down from exporting to China. Let's catch up with Michael Shoebridge from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute again. Great to talk to you, Michael. When is this going to stop? I mean, we've had meat producers hit before, of course, but we know about barley and wine growers. When's it going to stop?
I think when Beijing realises it's miscalculated, and this isn't just about what it's doing to Australia, but it's trashing its reputation internationally, and it's causing a whole lot of countries, companies and populations to reassess their plans to engage with China politically and economically. That's when this will stop.
And we're starting to see some estimates of just the extent of the economic damage that could be inflicted on Australia through this. We need to buckle down. The consequences could be more than 5% of GDP.
I don't think so. I think those are overestimates. The Australian economy is really being held up at the moment by high consumption spending through government stimulus, but also there's a good business recovery. And some of the markets that were meant to be hard hit by these Chinese moves have held up really well, like barley sales, with prices higher than they were before the Chinese action.
Oh, well, that is good. That is good news indeed. And what about the strategic factors at play here? We've talked before about other countries standing up in unison against this sort of action from China. Has there been much movement there? Has there been much more said or done by other nations?
I think we're seeing some big moves out of the EU and out of NATO. NATO's Secretary-General saying that China is a security challenge and a challenge to all NATO member countries from economic coercion. And of course, New Zealand being very clear in standing with Australia. But I think for Beijing, their strategy around telling everybody that the coronavirus came from somewhere else is backfiring very badly. They're even saying maybe it was European, Australian or US frozen beef.
Oh, good. Yeah, if you want an argument, you want it to be actually plausible. Now, just finally on the politics of this, it got a bit partisan last week. I was reading an academic's view about this originating back in the Labor years under the NBN decision, when Labor decided to ban Huawei from involvement in the NBN. Now, I checked this out a bit with some people I know in the field today, and that is actually right. Now, I say this in praise of Labor, not to condemn them, but perhaps the first critical decision that made Beijing very, very worried about what Australia was doing was that decision in 2012 to exclude Huawei from the NBN. The right decision taken by Labor then.
Yes, so I think watchers of Australia in Beijing that take any encouragement from a political split between the government and the opposition on China policy are in for a nasty surprise. There's a really solid stream of bipartisanship, and domestic politics sometimes gets in the way, but there is no air gap between them on the big issues like 5G or that NBN decision you mentioned too, Chris.
And indeed, other countries have caught up on that, the UK in particular, when it comes to Huawei. There was a bit of scratchiness last week. Anthony Albanese was criticising the government, but he seems to have walked back from that because, as you say, on the fundamental decisions, both sides are going to want bipartisanship here.
Yeah, and I think people that remember the good old days and say, oh, this is all about tone, are looking increasingly silly, outdated and out of touch. So I think Labor has to remember that, really. Scott Morrison has set a new foundation for our China relationship, and it's a set of foundations other countries are interested in too. It's now a matter of staying firm, cohesive and unified. And
expecting things to be rocky along the way?
Exactly, because Beijing still doesn't like Australia's decisions, and it hates even more the fact that those decisions are really being picked up and implemented in other parts of the world. So Michael, we're in for more of the same.
Thanks for joining us, Michael. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Michael Shoebridge there from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Someone's got to take some heat out of this. It'll take a while, as we keep hearing.